Hello guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Brittany and today I'm going to give you the extensive and fully detailed plot summary to the book and movie of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I have read the book, I have watched the movie twice, and I have extensive notes. So yeah, I don't want to make the intro too long because we're going to be here for a bit. We're going to be here for a minute. So a couple of things I want to mention before I get started yapping away. There are timestamps in this video, so if you want to skip around, please feel free to do so. To the book, I really enjoyed this book simply because there's pictures in this book, and I think that the pictures in this book just add to like the creepy lore of the stories. I really enjoyed that. Is there anything else? That is all I can think of at this time, and let's get started. We start off the book with Jacob. Jacob has a very close relationship with his grandfather. His grandfather, will say, he has multiple names. His name is Abe Portman, and he has grown up listening to his grandfather's stories. His grandfather is originally from Poland, but during the World War II, he had to leave his family and moved into an orphanage. This orphanage that had very fantastical children, peculiar children. One of the things about his childhood and why Jacob asked grandfather, like, why did you have to leave your home, was because of the monsters. The monsters, every time Jacob asked about them, the details of them would change. Like, sometimes they had very long tentacles, or that they smelled like trash, or you were only able to see them in light, so you could only see their shadows. And these information about these monsters were kind of piecemealed and given to Jacob in small doses. When his grandfather, Abe Portman, left Poland and moved to an orphanage that was in Wales. It's like an island near the coast, not the coast, in Wales. He lived there with children. He said that the person who ruled over the house was an old wise bird who smoked a pipe. And we learned about the invisible boy and the girl who can levitate and the brother and sister who were very good at holding up boulders but weren't very bright in the head. And so we're learning about these children and we're learning about Abe Portman's life. For the formative years of Jacob, who was the main character, he believed his grandfather's stories. He held them true within his heart, and when he went to school, he would tell his friends, his classmates, these fantastical stories of a boy who was invisible or a boy who was consumed or made up of bees. All of his peers thought that he was making up these stories and that he was just like living in fairy tales. And that day, Jacob decided that he no longer believed his grandfather's stories. His grandfather picked him up for school that day. He told him, I don't believe your stories. I don't believe that they're true. And that was the last that they spoke about it. His grandfather never brought up anything about the children in the orphanage and his time there at all. So 15 years later, an extraordinary event happens. To give a little bit of background on Jacob's life, he comes from a very well-endowed, monetarily lucrative family. On his maternal side, all of his uncles own all of the smart aids in the state of Florida, and it is a rite of passage that all of the teenagers like work at the store. Due to this nepotism, Jacob is having a very, very hard time getting fired, and he's doing everything he possibly can to do so, like coming in work late or letting a tower or like display tower of adult diapers fall to the ground and then just walking away. He's very much in a nuisance to his manager Shelly. And on this particular day, there is an intercom message that comes on telling Jacob that he has a call. He goes and picks up the call to hear his grandfather agitated, perturbed, and kind of frantic. He asks Jacob, where's the key? Jacob says, I don't know what key you are referring to, but this is a lie. Jacob knows exactly what key his grandfather, Abe Portman, is asking for. In his grandfather's house, he has a shed that has guns and machinery and weapons that could supply a small militia, and The family think that Abe Portman has dementia, so they have hid the key away. Jacob responds to his grandfather being frantic, like, "Hey, I can come and see you. I can check up on you." And his grandfather says, "Don't come. It is not safe." Does Jacob listen? Of course not. He calls his best friend and, well, only friend, Ricky, who has this beat up car to drive him to his grandfather's house. When he's driving to his grandfather's house, Jacob is messaging his father. His father's name is Franklin, and his father, Franklin, is basically like, "Yeah, just check up on your grandfather, make sure that he's okay." At this time, while he's looking down at his phone, when he looks back up, he realizes that they're kind of lost. His grandfather lives in a neighborhood called Cul-de-sac Circle, which is literally just a whole bunch of cul-de-sacs sync together. He's lost track, and then out of nowhere, he tells Ricky the right directions to get on the right path to his grandfather's house. When they're driving there, he notices that one of his grandfather's neighbors is outside. He seems to be a blind man. His eyes are like kind of frosted white, but he's outside doing yard work. When he gets to his grandfather's house, he tells Ricky, "Hey, stay in your car because my grandfather has a lot of guns and he doesn't know you and he might shoot you, so don't come in with me." When Jacob walks into his grandfather's house, he notices that it has been ransacked. Everything is tattered like it's been burglarized. Jacob proceeds to walk outside of the front door and around the house, and he notices that there's like this slit that has been cut through the back door. When he turns around to look at the wooded area behind the house, he notices that the foliage that is in the back looks like it's been stamped on or somebody has walked through it. He walks into the forest and he's looking for his grandfather, and he finds his grandfather face down and on top of creeper grass, I believe, bloodied with a letter opener in his hand. He assumes that his grandfather is dead and he flips him over. At this time, Ricky is trailing, kind of getting close to Jacob because he went back to the car to pick up a gun. Jacob flips over his grandfather, thinking that he's dead. He is about to get ready to call 911, and his grandfather says, "Listen to me. He's not dead just yet," and he has some final words for Jacob. He says, "Find the bird in the loop on the other side of an old man's grave, September 3rd, 1940. Emerson, the letter. Tell them what happened, Jacob." And then he died. That night, there was no moon. The moon was gone and it was dark. However, Jacob could sense something creeping within the woods, something staring at him. He quickly took the flashlight that he found near his grandfather's house, that he was traveling with throughout the woods, and shined it into the forest. He took Ricky's gun and shot at this figure. The figure, he states, a carbon black loose flesh and face that appeared to be transplanted. Tentacle mouth, scary figures from Jacob's dream. After that, Jacob blacks out. So the aftermath of his grandfather Abe Portman's passing has caused some division. One, his parents are very concerned about him and his retelling of events. They're like, "What monster? What are you talking about?" They're worried about him to the point where they hire him like a tutor so he only has to go to school when he feels up to it. He's finally able to quit the job, the smart A job that he's been trying to quit for quite some time. However, Jacob keeps on having this reoccurring dream. In the dream, he is in his grandfather's bedroom, and there is a vending machine where the bed is supposed to be. In the vending machine, it has a whole bunch of like knives and guns and weapons, and outside, he starts to see like black tentacles trying to get into the room. His grandfather goes over to the vending machine and puts money in to vend out a weapon. However, when the weapon drops, it gets stuck. Abe Portman then bends into the machine trying to reach under it with his hands, but he gets stuck in the machine. And then all of a sudden, as his grandfather is stuck in this vending machine, all of the monsters with their black tentacles take over the room, and then he wakes up. Soon after his grandfather's passing, Jacob's father, Franklin, and Jacob go to a Portman's house to clear it out. They're clearing it out, and Jacob is kind of realizing or having this irritation towards his father's lack of emotion due to his father's death. Like he doesn't seem like he's mourning or feeling sad that his father is dead, and Jacob is kind of getting upset. This is shown through Jacob kind of wanting to keep some tokens of memorabilia from his grandfather, and his father's just like, no, you can just throw that away. Jacob rebuttals because he's angry and states, "What if you died and I threw away all of your half-finished manuscripts?" This is the first time where we decisively kind of peer into who Franklin, Jacob's father, is. He is a man that he doesn't really have to work because of his wife's money. However, he has a lot of ambitions when he wants to write a book or craft a project, but he's a chronic unfinisher. Like, he cannot finish a product. And this really kind of stings, and his father takes it personal. Jacob's upset and he storms away. He slams the door and secludes himself into his grandfather's room. Underneath his bed, he finds those same pictures that his grandfather used to show him when he was a child, of like the invisible boy and the boy who was made of bees and the brother and sister duo who used to hold boulders. And in this box, he finds other pictures as well, like a girl in the bottle, or a child that is suspended by something that is hiding in the shadows of the picture, a boy with a dog face, a contortionist, and some very kind of creepy twins. He's seeing these pictures and he's looking at them and he thinks, okay, like this is definitely Photoshop. Throughout this book, you kind of have this flip-flop idea that Jacob goes through with I believe, I don't believe, I believe, I don't believe. This is a point where he's kind of getting into like, oh yeah, this is all baloney and this is just some sick joke that my grandfather was pulling on me right before he died. And he's like, these pictures can't be real. They look so photoshopped, and he's in disbelief that he kind of believed this as a child. And he takes the photos and he throws them away. As a semblance of normalcy, his mother throws him a surprise birthday party that is very much more for her than it is for Jacob. He definitely doesn't want it. His friend Ricky does show up. This is kind of like their last moment that they see each other because they stop having a friendship, because Ricky thinks that Jacob is lying about the monster in the woods because Ricky's like, I didn't see anything. I think he's crazy, certifiable, and that has caused their friendship to dissolve. Jacob gets a few gifts from his family, but the one more noticeable and important book is one that his aunt gives to him that was from his grandfather. It is a book by Ralph Walden Portman. On the cover page of the book is a letter or a note from his grandfather that says, "To Jacob and all the world he is yet to discover." Also in the book is a letter from Miss Peregrine, and it reads something like this. "My dearest Abe, I hope this note finds you safe and in the best of health. It has been such a long time since we have last received word from you, but I write not to admonish, only to let you know that we still think of you often and pray for your well-being, your brave, handsome Abe. As for life on the island, little has changed, but quiet and orderly is the way we prefer things. I wonder if we would recognize you after so many years, though I'm certain you recognize us. Those few who remain, that is, it would mean a great deal to have a recent picture of you, if you have one to send. I've included a positively ancient snap of myself. Eve misses you terribly. Won't you write to her? With respect and adoration, Head Mistress Alma Faye Lefay Peregrine." Now is his exploration and his duty to get his parents to let him go to, what is it, this city called? Carnholm, Wales. Since the recent death of his grandfather, Jacob has been seeing a therapist, Dr. Goland, and him, along with his parents, they all talk about him going to Carnholm, to go to Wales. Let's just say Wales. His therapists agree that it's a good idea for him to go, just to understand that like his ideas and what he's dreaming about are not real. They're not real. They're just a figment of his imagination. And he thinks that his therapist thinks that it would be a good way for him to mourn and move on from his grandfather. His father, who has an obsession, not obsession, has a very fond interest for birds, also goes to this island with Jacob because this island is known for their peregrines. Peregrine? They are falcons, and he wants to write a book about peregrines. Jacob and his father are on their way to Wales. They are on a ferry, and as they are driving to shore, Jacob notices that there are so many shipwrecks. Like there's so many like half sinking ships along the coast of this island, which is very alarming, but he takes note of it. When his father, Franklin, and Jacob finally make it to shore, they are looking because they're staying in the only hotel on this island called the Priest Hole. They rightfully think that this is going to be in a church, and they walk up to the church building and go in. There's a man who is like eager and excited because he thinks that there are new guests who are going to visit what is not a hotel but actually a museum. He is sadly disappointed when they find out that they're at the wrong location and they are not here for this attraction. He does give them a little bit of information about the orphanage and that Jacob should not travel to the orphanage alone. It is on the other side of the island, and he shouldn't do it alone. His father, Franklin, agrees, and eventually they make it to the priest hall, which is like a very small hotel, but their main revenue source is a pub that they have on the ground floor. After a day of jet lag, Franklin, the father, is more interested in going to scout out birds, and Jacob wants to go to the orphanage. His father tells him that you can go, you just can't go alone. And Jacob randomly walks into a store. It's a fishmonger's establishment, asking if the owner would take him to the orphanage. The owner says, "No, I'm not taking you because no. And why do you want to go anyway?" But he enlists his son Dylan to take him to this orphanage. Dylan and Jacob are walking. Dylan is very like recluse. He's not really speaking. He's not really trying to be friends with Jacob. However, they do pass this man named Worm. Worm is he's like Worm and Dylan are like aspiring rappers. Worm also very much stands out because he wears like this bright yellow tracksuit with fake chains. And they are walking up through the woods pretty much. They take off this beaten path and they walk through this herd of sheep, and there's like this small house. And Dylan and Worm tell them like, "Hey, that here it is." Like go into the house. Jacob's like, okay. He walks into it, and it's not really a sheep house. It is like a house filled with sheep excrement, basically with sheep feces. And they're like, basically Dylan and Worm are playing a joke on him because they honestly did not think that he was so serious about actually going to the orphanage. They tell him, okay, well, the orphanage is kind of like through this path. We aren't coming with you. You can go by yourself. Jacob proceeds to walk through the bushes, and eventually the trees like open up. They open up, and what Jacob saw, he said, "What stood before me now was no refuge for monsters, but a monster itself. Staring down from its perch on a hill with a vacant hunger, trees burst forth from broken windows and skins from scabrous vines gnawed at the walls, like antibodies attacking a virus. As if nature itself had waged war against it, but the house seemed unkillable, resolutely upright despite the wrongness of its angles and the jagged teeth of the sky visible through the sections of collapsed roof." This image of the house did not deter Jacob. He decides to walk around, and as he's walking around, he's noticing like these balconies like perching out. Like it's a very peculiar home. And he gets to the back of the house, and there is this black doorless entryway, and he decides to walk into it. Yeah. He walks into the house, and he notices like leftover toys that have just been left there. There's cans in the kitchen that have burst over open with time. There are sections of the wall that have been literally replaced with trees and foliage as they have like consumed, as if the forest has like is starting to consume the house. Jacob came to the decision that his grandfather has sent him on a goose chase and there's no way that anybody is living here, and he leaves. And at this point he's just like, this is his first 24 hours on this island. It's been a waste of time. He came here and like none of it's true. And he doesn't need to be here. As Jacob goes back to the pub or the priest hall to meet his father, he sits down, he starts having a conversation with him regarding what his relationship is, what Franklin's relationship is with Abe Portman. And his father, Franklin, kind of really informs him that I wasn't as close with my father as you were with him, that he was always away on trips, that he never missed an opportunity to go hunting and be away from his family, and that there were letters and he suspected that Abe was cheating on his mother. And Jacob gets very upset about this insinuation, upset to the point where he storms out of the pub, kind of looking for answers. He finds himself back at the church that they originally went to, thinking that it was their hotel. He walks in, and the curator who was working is no longer there, so he decides to peruse around. He's looking around, and he walks into this room that is roped off, but he just doesn't pay attention to that, I guess, and just walks in. And in the room lay a corpse. The corpse is almost like framed in plexiglass. It is blackened with tar, and it's like this monster corpse looking figure. It looks like one of the monsters from Jacob's dream. So as Jacob is kind of being perturbed by this corpse that is just laying there, the curator, walks in. His name is Martin Pagnant. He tells him that this is the island's oldest resident, that he is known as the Old Man. Even though he died at the age of 16, he has been preserved for over like 1,000 years. And that he died from like disembowelment, strangulation, drowning, and a blow to the head. Essentially what's happened, this boy at the age of 16 has died, and he died in the bog. The bogs are seen as a separation between this life and the life of God's. The bog isolates like oxygen and bacteria, so this corpse hasn't decayed in the more traditional manner in which a corpse would decay in. And Martin is very overly fascinated with this corpse, to the point where he asked Jacob, don't you think that he's handsome? Jacob proceeds to ask Martin about the orphanage. He's still looking and pining for answers, and Martin tells him, I don't have the answers, however, I do have an uncle. His name is Uncle Augie, who would have some information. Jacob and Martin go to see Martin's uncle, Uncle Augie, and he informs him that in September 3rd of 1940, a bomb was dropped by the Nazis onto the orphanage, killing everybody except one person. At this point, Jacob is connecting the dots that the one surviving member was his grandfather, and he's also rekindling a little bit of hope because that September 3rd of 1940 is something also that his grandfather stated to him in his dying breath. Jacob goes back to meet his father and kind of gives him a little bit more information about his grandfather that even Franklin, his father, did not know. And stating that maybe the reason why you guys weren't close or that he couldn't be as affectionate with you is because he already lost two families. Like he lost his family in Poland, and then he lost his family again when a bomb was dropped on his house at the orphanage. His father is perturbed and upset about the fact that there are things about his father's life that he didn't know. Jacob is in this very weird position where how can you tell your father how can you make it seem okay that you had a closer relationship with your grandfather than your father did with his own father? Even though Jacob has figured out the whole September 3rd, 1940 situation, he's still trying to understand the letter from Miss Peregrine. He thinks that either one or two things. Either Miss Peregrine isn't who she says she is, or the name is just an alias name for something else. That night, Jacob finally has a restful sleep. Like, he actually sleeps pretty well, and he is woken up to a peregrine bird landing on his dresser in his hotel room. He kind of like freaks out, and the bird flies out of the window. He tells his father sees the claw marks on the dresser and states, "Oh, these birds usually never get this close to human beings. Like, that's interesting." At this, Jacob takes it upon himself to walk back to the abandoned or the bombed orphanage. He walks in and he has two options. He can either go upstairs or he can go to the basement. He decides, let's go upstairs. As he's walking upstairs, he goes to a room on the far end. It is locked, but he kind of like he pushes it open with aggression. Essentially, like, he forces it open. He forces open the door, and in the room, he can kind of feel like there's somebody watching him. There's somebody stalking him to a certain extent. He has a feeling that this used to be his grandfather's bedroom when he used to live here, and he has like a little bit of a breakdown. Like, he's crying and mourning the loss of his grandfather. And at this time, he notices that there is a chest under one of the beds. He goes to the chest and he tries to use the materials in the room to open it, but he cannot. So his next best idea is that he's going to try to push the chest to the edge of the stair and then just throw it off of just let it fall off of the banister, and hopefully it'll crack open on like the main level. So with all his might, he pushes it to the edge, makes it fall down, and when he gets up to look to see if the trunk has opened up, he sees that the trunk has busted through the first level of this house and is now in the basement, scattered. And scattered on the floor are pictures. He takes out his phone, walks all the way down to the basement, and is trying to get through. He has to go through a lot. One, he notices that there are jars of like organs on the shelves on these basement that he smells formaldehyde. Eventually he does get to the trunk. He has a little bit of daylight that's coming in from the first level, so he can see where the trunk and the pictures lie. When he gets to the trunk, he is starting to look at the photos. The photos always give this very eerie, like horror movie vibe. The children are never smiling. Like, there's this one picture of these two girls. They look like they're at the beach, but instead of facing the camera, they're facing the ocean and they're just staring there. Or there's another girl, she's in a cemetery. She's in a cemetery pond. She's like by it. And you see one girl like standing near the pond. However, when you look at the reflection in the water, there's two of them. And another picture that he sees are this boy who is covered in bees. Like, he is like made up of bees. As he's looking at these pictures, he hears noises. He hears noises upstairs, like footsteps. He tries to hide, and then a female's voice says, "Abe, is that you?" Jacob's too stunned to speak. They look at him, and when he doesn't return back, they kind of bolt and just run for it. Jacob at this point is trying to run after them, specifically the girl's voice who he heard. He's running and he's noticing that she is running towards the bog. The bog that kind of distinguishes, or is this middle ground between land and ocean. And he is running. He is running and she is running faster. She kind of cuts into this cave-like area, and Jacob still proceeds to follow her. He follows her into this cave where he's kind of like hunched over and has to almost like crawl into this cave. And when he gets into the basin, that's the best word I can use, the base of it, she's not there. She's like nowhere to be found. He turns around and just crawls back out feeling defeated. And when he crawls back out, the weather has changed. Back where he was, or the earlier part of the day, was gloomy and it was rainy and overcast, but here it's sunny. It's bright. It feels like summer. And he finds that weird, but he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go see my father at the pub. He goes to the pub and he is about to walk upstairs to his room when the members of the pub are like, what are you doing? Where are you going? Jacob's like, oh yeah, I stay here, like, just as the manager, like, I'm here. They're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm the manager, we don't know you. And they start getting very aggressive with him to the point where they think that he is a German spy randomly. And before Jacob can get into any kerfuffle with these people, he runs out. He runs into the alleyway only to be pressed upon the wall with a knife against his throat by a girl. A girl who is asking, who are you? Are you a white? Why are you here? Like basically attacking him. He hands the girl who has a knife to his neck the letter from his grandfather that he got from his grandfather that is actually from Miss Peregrine. Basically, she's just like, this could be fake. And then they don't have any time because the men from the bar have left the bar and are hunting after Jacob. They run through the houses and they hide in this random house. And Jacob asks, like, hey, like, what day is it? To this girl, and she's just like, look for yourself, look on the calendar. He goes over and he recognizes that today is September 3rd, 1940. And then things started getting blurry and he passes out. And when he wakes up too, he's trying not to make that much noise to be noticeable, but he hears the girl's voice who he's familiar with speaking to another like male voice, but he can't see him. You can't see him, but he hears him. And then out of nowhere, they know that Jacob is up and there is a cup of water that is somehow like levitating and being given to Jacob. These two people are Emma and Millard. Millard is the boy who is invisible, especially like when he doesn't have any clothes on, he's completely invisible. The only time you can distinguish him is when he is clothed. And the girl is Emma. We'll get back to her in a minute. At this point, Emma and Millard are trying to help Jacob get to the headmistress, which is Miss Peregrine. However, they are having to dip and dodge mobs of people who are trying to kill Jacob because they think he is a German spy. This leads to the bar burning and some other possible felonies. So after Emma and Millard get away from the mob of people trying to kill Jacob, they go to the orphanage. The orphanage is just like the monster house that Jacob knew, but it's not a monster, it's the antithesis. It is clean and looks like it's well taken care of. And he meets Miss Peregrine. Miss Peregrine is trying to lower the defenses of Emma because Emma is very skeptical of Jacob and it's kind of like side-eyeing him and thinks that he has nefarious reasons. Whereas Miss Peregrine is trying to inform her, like, this is definitely Abe Portman's grandson because he looks like him. Jacob is still confused. He's still trying to gather answers as to, like, where he is, but he understands that this is the loop. And the other side of the old man's grave is this place because he had to go to the other side of the bog. And the bog is where the man from the church was found. Are you putting the pieces together? I hope so. So Miss Peregrine gets a little bit of information. One of the information that Jacob does inform is that his grandfather is dead. However, Jacob gives Miss Peregrine the watered down version that he was killed by dogs. And that is the story that the police in Florida have gone with. That's not the truth, but that's the story that the police officers have gone with. Miss Peregrine explains that she can transform into a bird, and one of her peculiarities, the thing that makes her peculiar is that embrees are always women, and they are women who can manipulate the passage of time, which creating a loop. Because there was a bomb in 1940 on September 3rd, they have created a loop so that the kids don't die, and they basically stay in this loop forever. And the embrees, the headmistresses, create this loop and start this loop over every single day, and that is their responsibility. And that there are many other loops. One of the more important loops is Miss Avocet. She is kind of like the HBIC of inbrings. Like, she teaches all of them. She keeps them together. She's the one that matters. I could name the other ones, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Also, Jacob realizes that Emma and his grandfather, a Portman, were romantically close while he was there. And Jacob asked, like, was my grandfather peculiar? Was he special in some way? And they say, yes, he was peculiar just like you. Does that really provide him any answers? Not really. But we're moving on. After Jacob kind of gives a little bit of background information on this new world that he is currently in, he goes and eats dinner with the other peculiar children. One of the more noticeable people in this book is a girl who is sitting at the table who has a back mouth. Like there's a mouth in the back of her head. And she has these curly blonde locks that cover it, and she is showing Jacob how she eats. And she takes the leg of a sheep, I think it's like a sheep leg, and eats it. Yeah, she eats it. And it's very like, oh, that's peculiar, but kind of cool, but a little peculiar type of thing. The one thing that all the children want to show Jacob is the bomb dropping. And they're really excited about basically showing Jacob how the loop ends. So they all go out with gas masks and they're looking up at the sky, and there's like these, it's not fireworks, but it looks like fireworks. And Miss Peregrine says that this is our beautiful display. It's kind of like the first startings of the bomb dropping. After they see these light display, they run over to the other side of the house, and there is a girl there. There's a girl there who is really good. Her name is Fiona, who is good at manipulating trees and vegetation to grow faster. And she has created like this very leafy foliage replica of the old man, like the man that died in the bog. And Jacob is freaking out because there's a bomb that is about to drop. And the bomb drops. It drops and everything goes white, and he kneels down on the ground and is freaking out. All the children are laughing at him because Miss Peregrine, her job is to restart and circle back time. And then the bomb is gone all of a sudden, and it is night again, and the loop has reset itself. That's enough for Jacob, and he is ready to go home. He is accompanied by Emma back through the loop. And while they're going through the loop, Emma definitely relates to him that one of the reasons why she was kind of adverse for him being here is the factor that she would have to grapple with the factor that Abe is dead. That if he is showing up, Abe Portman has passed away, and she just wasn't ready to do that, so she just took her anguish out on him. But they have a very heartfelt moment where they kind of cry in the loop, and she like gives him a hug. She's very much more of like a standoff person, and this is not like really in her character at all, but she gives him a hug and then leads him on his way. When Jacob gets back, his father is very much concerned. Franklin is concerned. He is concerned. He's concerned because he thinks that his son has spent all day at that abandoned house, and he calls Dr. Goland, stating he has spent all day at this abandoned house. He is not okay. We need to go home now. And Dr. Goland like talks his father off the edge. Like, listen, let him roam. Let him have his moment. Let him have his time. He needs air to breathe. You know, he needs breathing room. And so his father does so. He gives him freedom and breathing room to do what he wants to do. The next day, Jacob is up bright and early going through the loop to meet Emma. Emma and Jacob have a fantastical day. They go to like a talent show where they see Bronwyn, who is the brother-sister duo who holds like boulders. Bronwyn like hold a big boulder. She sees Fiona, who again does the growing of trees fast. And they also go swimming. He goes swimming with Emma and Millard. Millard is the one who is invisible. And then Horace. Horace is a very proper, well-dressed young boy who has prophetic dreams. He has prophetic dreams, as in like majority of his dreams are either about clothes or they're about things that will actually happen and come true. And they go swimming. They have a great time swimming, and then eventually it is time for Jacob to go back home because he told his father that he'd be home before dinner. When he gets home in due time and he hears his father calling his name through the woods, he sees his father, walks up to him, and he's like, "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" Because there have been some sheep on the island that have been killed, and the farmers believe that a teenager has done it. The primal suspects are Dylan, Worm, and Jacob. They kind of interrogate both of them, and lo and behold, they state that Worm is the one who did it. Worm is guilty of it, and he's getting taken away. Right before Jacob had to leave Emma in the loop the prior day, they took a picture, and Emma also gave Jacob an apple. The next day, when Jacob woke up, he had the picture, but the apple has disintegrated. It has become like this leathery ball. It has aged in what seemingly feels like in no time. And this is a euphemism. Also, to mention, yesterday, on the past day, when Jacob was going swimming with the children, he gave them information about like what emails were and all the latest crave and all the fun things that happen in the future. And so when he goes back through the loop the next day, he is intercepted by Miss Peregrine. Miss Peregrine is upset. She is pissed because she's stating, do you think that it is wise to tell children about events of the future that they will never live? Do you think that it's wise to like kind of play in their faces all of the fun that you have in like your current reality without any thought to where they are currently? And so she's upset with Jacob for kind of disclosing all of this information about the future and giving children like these hope to go out and explore, when the factor remains that if they leave, they will die because they're technically old. They have been in this loop since 1940. Miss Peregrine tells him the story of this one girl named Elizabeth. Miss Peregrine had to leave the loop to handle business, and Elizabeth has escaped. She escaped, and when she went into town and couldn't explain her whereabouts or where she came from, they put her in like child protective services and sent her to the mainland. By the time Miss Peregrine could come and get her, she had aged so quickly that when she got back, she just mentally was not okay. That she was an old lady, not old lady, but she was an older woman, a full-grown woman with the mindset of a child in children's clothing. And Miss Peregrine's like, I don't intend for that to happen again. And she calls Jacob dumb and then dismisses him. Over the last couple of days, Emma and Jacob have like started this like flirtation that is very peculiar. But yeah, so he goes outside and he's waiting for Emma to return. She went on a store run to the city, the town center. And so he sits down in, or like leans against a tree and then falls asleep. He is woken up by a toy soldier trying to get into his shoe somehow. And he hears this little boy's voice that says, turn him around this way, or something to the effect. And this little boy is Enoch. Enoch is a little boy who takes toys, takes objects, and makes them come alive, gives them life in a sort of demented sense, but he's very much destructive. Like, he likes to give them life so that they can destroy each other, that they can fight. And he is one of those children that, like, if his toy soldiers don't fight in the way that he wants them to fight, he'll break off their legs. Enoch alludes to Jacob that there are things about this world that he does not know, but doesn't give him any specifics at all. He says that he can't tell him. However, you can go to the upstairs room down the hall. The key's on like the top of the frame, and you can go in and see for yourself. And Jacob's like, okay, like, I feel like there's a lot of things that people aren't telling me. There are these things that, like, Miss Peregrine will say that, you know, there's other types of danger, but she won't really say anything. Emma is very vague about her life and what this world is, and Jacob just wants to find answers. So he decides to go upstairs. In the orphanage, he goes, unlocks the door, and he walks in. He walks in and he's like, hey, how you doing? Like, he like walks in trying to talk to Victor. Victor is laying in the bed, and Victor is dead. They don't tell Jacob that. They don't tell Jacob that until he's in there. Enoch follows in behind him, about to take one of his cow hearts and put it in Victor to make him come alive, to wake him up in a sense. And Jacob really wants to know like why Victor has died. Again, Enoch is not really giving him any very specific information, but he says something to the effect of like he kind of like went stir crazy. and that not to go stir crazy, we raid the like town center every once in a while just to keep us alive. Jacob proceeds to leave. He's not supposed to be in Victor's room. Nobody's supposed to be in the room. That's why it's locked. And he's trying to avoid Miss Peregrine, who is walking down the hall. He unexpectedly and unintentionally walks into Emma's room, and he notices that it's Emma's room, the way it's like set up, and he finds her personal effects. Like she has like this journal, and in the journal is all of these pictures from his grandfather, like her sending him a letter with like a lipstick print on it, and saying like, oh my goodness, I miss you terribly, and all of these things. And one of the last pictures, or one of the last correspondence that Emma has with Grandpa Abe Portman, is asking like, why don't you message me anymore, like why don't you speak to me anymore, like are you not interested? And he sends her a picture of him holding a girl and says, this is why. And it is Grandpa Portman holding Jacob's aunt, and that is why he has stopped talking to Emma. After Jacob has pretty much read all of her information, Emma walks in. Emma walks in disappointed that Jacob has gone through her things, and very much in the spirit of, if you had questions, you could have just asked me. And he's like, I wanted to know what happened between you and my grandfather. And she was just like, well, I guess let's go right to the end. Let's not even talk about all the good stuff. And she tells him and states to him that Abe Portman left the loop. He left the loop because save he wanted to fight against all the monsters who were trying to kill and destroy all the orphans. He wanted to fight and find them and kill them so that peculiars didn't have to live in a loop and have to be protected by these monsters. These monsters, still to this day, still at this point in the story, to Jacob, are these very elusive beings. Like, he's hearing about them, but not in great detail or any great explanation. Abe left to be a hero, and he never came back. So Jacob is like a little like weirded out, but Emma kisses him and he kisses her back, even though that's technically his grandfather's ex-girlfriend. But I guess we digress. Jacob is about to leave and go back to the 21st century again, and Emma gets him to promise to come back tonight. And at night, she's like, I'll tell you everything you want to know. Jacob's like, okay. He leaves and goes sees his father at the pub, and his father kind of looks like sulking and in a bad attitude. And he asks him like, what's going on? His father is working on this book about peregrines. However, there has been a new visitor to the island. The new visitor is this man who's like roughening it, like he's living out in the nature, about writing this book. And so his father, Franklin, has lost ambition to write this book. At this point, Jacob knows that his father probably needs some pep talk, motivation, but he really doesn't have it to give at all. So he just kind of like lets his father be a quitter. And late that night, he sneaks off, goes back to the loop to meet Emma. At this point, he's trying to have like some restraint because he finds it a little bit weird to have a crush on his grandfather's ex-girlfriend. But at the same time, he don't get a lot of play. So he's like, I don't know how to explain that any better. He's trying to remain strong. They go to a boat. Like, Emma convinces Jacob to go swimming. They go swimming, they get into a rowboat. They take this rowboat over to one of these sunken ships, and Emma just gets out of the boat, walks on like the hull, like the small part of the boat that is still above water, opens up the hatch, and then just dives in. She just dives in, and Jacob follows her. And they just look at rainbow fish and breathe through like a breathing tube underwater. And then they leave. They come back to shore. When they get back to shore, they kiss again, and then Jacob gets a little bit more information. That one, only peculiars are able to pass through a loop. One. Two, Jacob is peculiar because this whole first part of the book he has not believed that he's peculiar, but he is peculiar specifically because he can see the monsters. And him and his grandfather were like the only two, they're very rare, the only two who could actually see the monsters. Jacob is like, oh yeah, like that's the people who, those are the monsters that killed my grandfather. And all the pieces start coming together. And then finally, some answers. Emma explains that Victor died because he left the loop for too long, and that the monsters cannot hurt us inside of the loop. That's why we have it. After Emma and Jacob have their good talk, there are two children on the shore trying to get their attention and beckon them back to the orphan house because there has been an issue. In the orphanage, not the orphan house, girl. In the orphanage, Miss Avocet. You remember when I talked about her before, the HBIC of all the inbreeds, the head mistresses? Yeah. She is there and she's explaining that there have been some weights that have invaded their loop, have invaded her loop, and have endangered her children and stole away the other headmistress that lives there. And she's just like, it's not safe. You guys need to be on alert. I was able to get away, but I just came here to warn you. Mrs. Peregrine puts some safety plans into place and tells all the children to go to bed. She tells Jacob that he needs to stay, and Jacob's like, okay, stay. That's one thing, but I have so many questions that I need to be answered. And he forces her to stay up and answer those questions. One of the issues that Jacob is upset about is that Miss Peregrine knew that he was peculiar but never told him, didn't inform him. And she's basically stating that, your grandfather wanted to protect you. He wanted to save you. And then two, she starts explaining what these monsters are. So, the monsters, let's talk about them. A while ago, Miss Peregrine had two brothers, and these two brothers were peculiar. However, they wanted to be able to be peculiar, live outside of loops, but still have kind of like to live forever, everlasting life type of vibe. And they conducted an experiment. However, these experiment didn't turn out too well. It kind of rebooted them all the way back prior to when their souls were even formed, and they were these very horrid, perturbed beings called hologast. These hologast kind of live in this consistent state of hell. So they live like in physical torment. They have like this insatiable desire for like food. They just live like a very hard life. It's not fun. And so, however, they have learned that if these hologast eat children, specifically peculiar children, they can turn into whites. Whites have a more of a human-like quality. However, the only distinguishable feature is that they have white eyes. And that hologast are not able to pass through loops. However, whites are. They can pass through loops. And what happens is when they turn into whites, they start basically recruiting children for their friends. And so you have whites in very peculiar jobs. Like some of them are like Santa Clauses, or they work in dental offices. And they like to document their prey. So they will like literally take pictures of children before they like eat them. So getting to the stage of whites is kind of like going from hell to purgatory. It's like slightly better. After this revelation, Jacob tells Miss Peregrine like, hey, there's this random man that has like followed us on this island that nobody visits. Nobody visits this island, but this random man has followed. And she asks, like, is his eyes white? And he's like, I don't know. I never got that close. There was this one time where he, like, stared at him as he was entering the bog, but he couldn't see his eyes. And Miss Peregrine's like, stay away from him. And Jacob leaves, goes back through the loop because he wants to inform his father and keep his father safe from Birdman. However, when he comes back, there have been some developments. As Jacob has made it back to the 21st century, his father, again, is calling his name because a member, Martin Pagnant, the man that he met at the church, has been murdered. And because it's such a small town and they don't really know what to do with the body, they take the body and they put it in a ice chest in the fishmonger's shop to until somebody, a ferry, can come to take the body to the mainland. The people who originate on this town are very worried about the newcomer. They kind of suspect the bird watcher to be acting weird. Like one time he comes into the pub and he literally asks for raw steaks, like random weird things like that. Jacob is able to skirt away from his father because he wants to go and inform Miss Peregrine of this information, of this news, and he's like, okay, I need to kind of go back home. And Miss Peregrine's like, no. First of all, we need you because you're the only one who can see the monsters. Two, if you go back, you can go back if you choose to, but do not return. Do not return because you are putting the risk of my children, of this home, and safety in jeopardy, and I won't have that. Instead, Jacob leaves with Emma, Enoch, and Bronwyn. Bronwyn is Victor's sister. Victor and Bronwyn are the ones who can like lift boulders. As they're leaving, Enoch gives Emma, Jacob, Bronwyn sheep hearts to keep in their pockets. The plan is they are going to go to the fishmonger shop. They're going to create or force Martin to come alive again to tell them who killed him, like who killed you. So they'll know if the new visitor is a monster or a white or not. They leave, however, they have to be kind of quick because these children will age if they stay outside of the loop too long. They run to the fishmonger's shop. They break into it and they take each heart and they put it into Martin, the deceased man. Martin wakes up and he's just like, oh my goodness, like this hurts. And he's quoting poetry and saying a lot of things, specifically about the old man that he was so enthralled with that was framed. And he was just like, but he killed me. He killed me. And he's not talking about the framed man. He's talking about the man that is standing behind the children. There's a man walking into the shop and he's asking the children, what are you doing here? And that man is the bird watcher. Jacob automatically recognizes this man who has walked in as a white because he knows all of this information about the children, that Enoch, he came from a family of undertakers, and then because of Enoch's capabilities, these people were getting up and walking out of like the funeral home that they have. That Emma was sold to a circus. Bronwyn was recognized when she broke the neck of her like evil stepfather. And so Jacob is like realizing that, oh yeah, this is a white, like that's crazy. And they're kind of all like stood there in a state of shock. The thing that's more directly creepy to Jacob is that this white has been in Jacob's life his whole life. He was this bus driver that nobody liked, that always wore glasses. He was the landscaper at his house. He was the neighbor next to his grandfather that he saw when he saw his grandfather died. And most importantly, he is also Dr. Goland, his therapist that has promoted and influenced his parents to allow him to come on this trip. He's that person as well. Basically, he's like, thank you, Jacob. You have led me right to where I need to be. And so because they're in the 21st century, the Hologas has come, one of the white's friends, has come to eat the children so that he can become something more human-like. Before the Hologas is eaten up, the white gives Jacob a proposition. The proposition is, hey Jacob, why don't you help me go to different loops, find more children, and then you'll be safe. Just help us find more children so that we can become, so shallow gassed can become whites. And Jacob is tempted, but then he says like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the white leaves. He leaves them with the shallow gas that only Jacob can see. So they're all standing in this room with a dead body in the ice container. And there's the shallow gas who is like lurking and pretty much like toying with his prey. Out of nowhere, Bronwyn, the strong one, strong girl, she busts a hole into the side of the building and they all crawl out, and she pulls on one of the foundational beams of the establishment for it all to like come cradling down, and they start running for the woods, specifically running for the bog. They're running and they split up. They say that we can't make this easy for them, so Emma and Jacob go one way and Enoch and Bronwyn go another. Enoch and Bronwyn make it to the bog, make it through the loop to the other side to the orphanage, and Emma and Jacob have to stop and hide away in that house, that shed of sheep manure. But manure is cows. Excrement? And the sheep excrement. They hide away in that house, hoping that the smell of the feces will minimize their stench or their natural smell, so that the Hallo gas can't find them. However, the Hallo gas makes it to the shed and he literally starts eating all of the sheep. He like starts just butchering them like one by one, ravenously. And at this point, Jacob takes it upon himself to try to save Emma and darts out of the house, telling the Hallo gas, like, here I am, come and get me. And Emma makes a run for the bogs, and so does Jacob. Jacob, he finally makes it to the loop and he is crawling into the loop. However, he starts being pulled out by the shallow gas. He gets pulled out, and then out of a stroke of luck, he has taken a pair of scissors from the sheep shed and stabs the Hallo gas in the eye, effectively killing it and leaving it in the bog. Then Emma and Jacob make it back through the loop to Miss Peregrine's orphanage, home for peculiar children, and Miss Peregrine is gone. The White has taken her. There's an information that the White has also taken Miss Avocet. They have forced them to turn into bird form, locked them in a very, very small cage, and has left. And the consequently children have been locked in the basement. Effectively, thankfully, Millard, who's invisible, has kind of hidden away, or hidden in plain sight essentially, and allowed the kids to come out. However, they are trying to get to the White and save Miss Peregrine and Miss Avocet. So the reason why the White has come to steal the headmistresses is they are going to enact the experiment again, because they still want to live forever. And the idea is that if they harness all of the power from all of the headmistresses of all the loops, they can pretty much live forever they can just live forever. I don't have anything else to say. So at this time, Millard, Jacob, Emma, and Bronwyn all get into a rowboat because they see that the White with the cage of birds is on a lighthouse that is in the middle of the ocean. He is waiting for his ride. And so they try to, actually, no, he has stolen their boat. He has stolen their sailboat. And they literally decide to swim. They decide to swim towards the White, who is trying to take these headmistresses away. And he starts to shoot at them. And Millard gets shot. He gets shot because he thinks that he's invisible in water, which he is not. He's not invisible in water. Bronwyn has a really good idea to take one of the metal doors from the ships that have sunk, using it as a shield, as all four of the children are like behind it, swimming towards the lighthouse. Eventually, the children make it to the lighthouse after events. Millard is shot, and Bronwyn is down on the main level trying to kind of help him stitch up his wounds so he doesn't die and bleed out. And Emma and Jacob go to the top of the lighthouse where the White is there with the birds, and they're kind of fighting him. He doesn't have his gun anymore because he's dropped it. He dropped it after Bronwyn flung the metal door at him. and they're trying to basically attack the white to stop him. He takes the bird cage and throws it over into the water, and he proceeds to choke Emma. Jacob takes the gun that the white has dropped previously and shoots him in the neck. He falls over the railing as well. Emma and Jacob go down to the ground level and jump back into the ocean trying to save the birds. And the birds have not sunk. They have technically landed on a submarine. Yeah. They landed on a submarine, and one of the soldiers get out, open up the cage, and throws one of the birds out. That bird just so happened to be Miss Peregrine. The bird is damaged, and when the bird not damaged, the bird is injured. When the bird are injured, or when the inbrings are injured, they cannot transform back to human, so they're kind of just stuck there. At this point, Horace, who is the well dressed boy who has dreams, has had another dream of where the experiments are going to be taking place, the experiments that they're going to redo, and it is time to go to where their experiments are to stop them because the loop is about to close. Because if Miss Peregrine is not in her, I guess, human form, she can't turn the time back, and we need her. And the loop is about to close. And when the loop closes, that's it. That's it. You have to go, like a new loop would have to start. And what will happen is instead of it being September 3rd of 1940, it's going to be September 4th of 1940. Before Jacob is able to leave and be okay with just kind of going and protecting these children, because again, he's the only one who can see the monsters, he needs to go back to say goodbye to his father. He goes back to his father at the priest hole, and he is writing his father a letter, and he's kind of like, I'm not sure if it's right, if it's correct. And his father walks in on him writing this pretty much a farewell letter. Jacob's friends also walk in. Olive, Emma, and Millard walk in. So Millard's the one who can't see. Olive is the one who is as light as air. And then Emma is fire. She's like really good with like fire. They walk in and they kind of like show their peculiarity to Franklin, the father, and he thinks that he's sleeping. So he goes back to take a nap, and Emma leaves a very heartfelt letter, basically for Jacob saying goodbye, and leaves a picture of her and Abe Portman. And they go back through the loop because the loop has closed, and the last picture is them on a boat sailing away to hopefully a new life. But anyway, it's been quite a while. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. My name is Brittany, and today's video was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. And guess what? I'll see you next time.